Welcome to the Black Ship Universe channel. Now playing the Black Ship side story. What's the job? Chapter 14.
A few days had passed, and the time had arrived for the Staples family to be handed over to their buyers. The entire crew turned out for what was to be their final moments together. Nico was the first to enter the brig, followed by everyone else. The whole family looked on curiously, and this was not normally done. "Is everything all right?" Wirt asked, with concern obvious in his tone. Nico smiled sadly as he deactivated the barrier that had barricaded them in. "I'm afraid this is where we are to part ways." "What do you mean?" Weskel piped up, his piercing gaze set upon the captain. Nico cleared his throat as he eyed the young man who had become quite the student for him. "You know what I mean, Weskel. We were hired to do a job. And this is where that job ends for my crew and me." The family exchanged worried glances, but it was Wirt who spoke first. "Who are we being pawned off to, if it's not too much to ask, Captain?" he asked, with no small amount of agitation and uncharacteristic sarcasm. "The Castons," Nico answered quickly. The family let out a collective gasp when they heard who they were being delivered to. "No!" Winona said weakly, instinctively pulling her boys closer. Wirt shared her instant concern, knowing full well what Princess Clara and their own son had just done to the traitor fleet and, more specifically, one of their members. His expression shifted from anger to a much more submissive stance. "Please, Captain! I beg you!" "Not them. Not House Caston or House Centaur. Any other house on the traitor side, just not them. Please." Nico frowned, trying to look stern as he exhaled deeply, even if he didn't feel it. "I'm sorry. That's not how that works. I don't get to choose where you and your family go." He then held out an arm, gesturing for them to start moving forward. Wirt stepped in front of his family defensively with his arms out, holding them back as his brow furrowed angrily. Kartok raised his rifle when he saw the act of defiance, prompting Nico to raise his hand as a gesture to stand down. Meanwhile, Myra and Ada were shifting uneasily with their weapons out as well, struggling with this unfortunate set of circumstances as they played their parts. The normally passive Wirt hesitated in response, but finally managed to continue despite the shakiness he was now feeling in his limbs. "Then send just me. Please. Let them stay. I don't think you understand what they could do to us for revenge for our son wounding theirs." Nico shook his head. "If it were so simple, believe me, I would humor your request. Alas, that's not the deal. The arrangement is for all of you, not just one. If I could, I would. Now come along. Arguing is pointless." Defeated, Wirt slowly lowered his gaze and arms to the floor as the inevitability of their situation sank in. Yet he couldn't bring himself to take another step. Myra and Ada moved forward instead, holding out their arms quietly, gesturing for the Staples to follow them. All the while, the two avoided locking eyes with the Staples when they finally complied. When they left the cells, Nico looked back and noticed the boys had left their gear rather than take it with them. Another heavy sigh escaped his lips before turning away from the sight to follow them to the transport. While Ada and Kartok got the family locked into their seats and put them back in bindings to ensure an easy handoff, Winona moved to get Kartok's attention. He looked at her with a slight frown, unsure what she wanted as the cuffs clicked into place but didn't actually say anything. "Thank you for saving Wham," Winona said softly, almost as if in a daze, despite her obvious distress filling her eyes. "And I'm sorry for taking so long to say it." Her words sounded as if they came from someone heading to the gallows, like someone wanting to close old wounds on a good note before leaving this world. Or maybe simply hoping a kind word might trigger a reprieve. Kartok's frown deepened as his mouth opened with surprise and confusion. A moment later, he clenched his jaws and simply nodded, not saying anything in response. Outside the ship, Nico turned to Myra. "Be safe out there, all right?" he said simply, but with a warm smile. She stood a little straighter and grinned, surprised by the seeming concern. "Always. Just another drop, right?" Still surprised, they seemed to be going through with the actual transfer. Truth was, she hadn't believed they were actually going to hand them over at all. Still, she trusted her captain and figured he had another plan. Nico didn't answer. He just smiled and nodded. They both balled their right hands into fists and lightly punched each other's left shoulder. See you soon." While Myra turned and walked up the loading ramp, the captain turned his eyes toward Weskel, who had been watching the interaction. The second Weskel saw Nico looking at him. However, he turned away, causing the captain to smile in acceptance before likewise turning away and heading to the bridge. Standing on the cramped bridge of a heavy freighter recently rechristened the Bountiful Harvest for the occasion, Emmett Caiston nevertheless smirked as the ship dropped into the Mertormenta system, capital world of House Tempest. His mind was filled with images of his family celebrating his return while he held the family of their hated enemy. Truthfully, he could barely stand the weight. Shaking his head of these pleasant images, Emmett instead focused on the task at hand. So, as not to raise any suspicion, he first brought his ship toward one of the orbiting space stations that dotted the system. "Unknown vessel. State your name and business," commanded a voice from the station. Emmett cleared his throat and opened the channel. "This is Lord Emmett Caiston of the freighter ship Bountiful Harvest. I'm here to refuel and resupply on our way to House Tygan space. Requesting permission to dock." "Copy that, Bountiful Harvest. Just remember, this is neutral space, and House Tempest will not tolerate any hostile actions related to the House Wars within its territory. Do you copy?" "I copy that, Tower." "We're just here for peaceful purposes," Emmett lied as easily as he smiled. "Very well. You are cleared to dock on docking tube 17. Tower out!" Cutting off the channel, the tower operator put in a call to one of his dock hands. Bringing the ship in, Emmett wasted no time in contacting the dockmaster for what he said he was there for. He rudely ordered fuel and foodstuffs, demanded a better rate since he was a Caiston, and then cut the channel off before the poor soul taking the order could even finish thanking him for coming by. But while he was impatiently waiting for the dock workers to transfer said fuel and food supplies, one of those workers was just finishing a call. The man grabbed the fuel line and made his way through the docking tube to the transfer port at the end. Moving in to hook up the refueling hose, he gave a quick look around to make sure nobody was watching. His eyes drifted up nervously to the camera staring at him. However, up in the tower, the operator had just shut down that camera. A moment later, the dock worker slipped in a tracking device, attaching it to the inside of the fueling port panel that protected the Caiston vessel from the void. Once finished, he sent a message upstairs, and the tower operator turned the camera back on and resumed his duties as if nothing had happened. All in all, the operation took less than 30 minutes, and just as quickly as it had arrived, the Bountiful Harvest departed the station, headed for the coordinates given to them by the mysterious auctioneers. Emmett leaned back in his captain's chair, satisfied at how smoothly everything was going. The image of House Tempest's station shrinking into the void gave him a sense of superiority, as though even they bowed to Caiston authority when he demanded it. And once more were none the wiser to his true intentions. "They practically begged us to take their fuel," he muttered with a smirk. Behind him, one of his lieutenants shifted uneasily. "With respect, my lord, they didn't seem very pleased to see us." Emmett shot him a glare sharp enough to silence any further comment. The man quickly looked back at his console. "Doesn't matter. We'll be back in Caiston space before long, with the staples in our hold. Father will sing my praises after he hears from my great-uncle how well I did, how I helped further the glory of House Caiston, and the rest of you will dine on rewards for your loyalty." The crew gave a half-hearted cheer, though more than a few eyes flicked to the forward displays, watching the sensor readings as the freighter slid into a longer burn toward deep space. Meanwhile, back on the station, the dock worker wiped his brow as the tower operator leaned over his console. "You sure it latched?" the operator asked quietly. "Like a glove. They won't even know it's there unless they rip the whole panel open." The operator gave a thin smile. "Good. Then it's out of our hands. Now it's up to the ones who paid for the courtesy." He sent the encrypted transmission to a relay buoy sitting cold and silent at the edge of the system, where it would bounce toward its intended destination. Out in the black, the freighter's engines thundered along, oblivious to the tiny beacon now pulsing at its flank. As the ship closed in on the outer asteroid field of the system, the sensor operator called out, "My lord! Ship detected on the edge of the field, right where we were expecting it to be." Emmett practically jumped out of his seat at the sudden alert. but he didn't care. A smile beamed from ear to ear as the screen zoomed in on what the sensor operator had discovered. It's about time! I almost wondered if they had decided not to show up after all. When he saw what was there, his shoulders slumped at the lackluster visage. It was a smaller craft than he had expected, and he looked truly disappointed. That's interesting. How quaint. I hope the Staples enjoyed their accommodations. I half expected a frigate. Or at the very least, a freighter like this. How amusing that a ragtag band of limited means managed what the Tigans could not. He let out a hearty bit of laughter before focusing on the task at hand. Very well. Send the friend-foe signal, confirm they have the family, and then get them paid so we can head back to civilization as soon as possible, Emmett ordered, in as snobbish a way as could be conjured. In his mind, he almost couldn't believe how easy it was to fall into this much glory. While over a half-dozen Tigans were in prison after causing a great house to give its support to the prince while going after the same prize. He was going to accomplish what they failed to do simply by showing up, transferring a few credits, and going home. The whole thing was laughable. And if it weren't for his crew not understanding what he was laughing about, he'd burst out right this moment. For now, he contained his excitement, and he waited for a response from the tiny spacecraft. When the alert reached Myra that the bountiful harvest was trying to communicate, she rolled her eyes at the name of the ship, half wondering if they had changed the name just for this mission. Rather than answering, however, she patched the communication through to the silent runner, using her specialized cargo hauler as a relay. All right, and here we go, Nico muttered quietly, initiating the next phase of his plan while nodding to have the channel opened up. Go ahead, audio and visual. When it was displayed in front of him, the Caiston Lord would see Nico, but with his full armor concealing his face. Greetings, bountiful harvest, and welcome to the Murdermenta system. To whom do I have the honor of speaking? Emmett sat proudly in the captain's seat, trying to project as much authority and power as possible. In fact, he was now looking somewhat put out that he was not recognized. Putting that aside for now, he puffed his chest out a little more. I am Lord Emmett Caiston of the Great House Caiston. Fibbing just a little as he was actually part of a branching house, but figured this common rabble wouldn't know the difference anyway. He also didn't bother to ask the captain for his name, feeling it was quite beneath him and not worth his breath to ask. Nico grinned behind his helmet, suppressing a chortle while knowing full well that Lord Emmett wasn't a part of the main house bloodline. An honor indeed, Lord Emmett, he said with a small but respectable bow to really sell his supposed feeling of awe and respect. Thank you for being so prompt, my lord. I trust House Caiston is ready to handle business? We are. However, we will need proof that you are still in possession of the family before we are able to transfer the funds, Emmett said sternly. A very wise precaution, my lord. Stand by while I bring up interior visuals of the family awaiting transfer, Nico said before slowly doing just that. When the interior visuals finally came up, Emmett grinned widely as he compared the faces of those bound and secured to those his family's intelligence gathering had drummed up alongside the data sent during the auction itself. All identities matched perfectly, and he found himself amused at the distraught look on all their faces. Yeez, you squashed cabbage leaves. Just wait till you are in my house's hands. Then you'll really have something to be miserable over, he mumbled happily under his breath to himself. Not completely convinced, however, Emmett did turn to his comm operator after cutting off the audio. And we have confirmed this signal is coming from the cargo shuttle? Yes, my lord. No doubt at all, the operator quickly answered. Resuming audio, Emmett nodded. Very good. It looks as though everything is in order. Bring your ship forward, and I'll begin the transfer to your specified account. I beg your pardon, my lord, but I will require you to transfer the funds first before we initiate docking procedures, as per the instructions of the process sent to you during the auction, Nico stated firmly, but with humility so as not to antagonize the pompous lord. Emmett grumbled, but eventually turned to his officer. And they are the only ship present? Aye, my lord. No other ships on sensors, the officer confirmed. Emmett let out a long breath through his nose. Go ahead and transfer the funds. Turning back to the screen, he held up a finger in a threatening way. I'm warning you, though. If you try to make a run for it, we will blow you out of the sky. I won't care if the Staples are on board at that point. Mark my words. Consider them marked, Lord Emmett. But fear not. I desire nothing more than a simple, fair transaction, he said with a small nod and a charming smile. Seconds ticked by, but they felt like an age. Cutting off the audio, Nico asked without turning his head, Amara, are you ready? His tone now turning somber. With that traditional wild look in her eye, as always, she grinned wickedly. Always, Captain. With her grin widening, she continued, transfer complete and confirmed. Nico exhaled a heavy sigh. Please forgive me, Myra, he whispered. Amara, you may fire when ready. Transfer confirmed and complete, Captain, Emmett said impatiently. Please My lord, cried the weapons operator, interrupting the haughty Caiston. Our weapons have powered up and are targeting the cargo shuttle. What? No, you fool! Shut them down now! Growled Emmett angrily while staring at the shuttle in disbelief at what was happening. In the shuttle, Myra had just gotten on the comm to the silent runner. Confirmation received, moving to whoa! They're opening up on us! Instinctively, she veered the shuttle away and powered up its own PD turret while making a dash for the silent runner. Captain! I need some cover. We aren't going to last long out here like this. Her eyes went wide when she got a missile lock alert. No, she whispered as she desperately fought to maneuver the unwieldy craft, using the asteroids for any cover she could. Not like this. Aboard the bountiful harvest, chaos reigned. My lord, missile away! Self-destruct it now, Emmett ordered furiously. Turn us away. Shut it down. So somebody do something, he yelled desperately with every second that passed. We're trying, my lord. The controls aren't responding to anything, his men cried frantically as the freighter pressed forward in its hunt for the shuttle. Aboard the cargo shuttle, the starboard engine took a direct hit, causing the entire craft to lurch off course. Myra growled as she forced the craft back on course with the last reserves of strength she had left. Damn you, Nico, where are you? She asked, her voice cracking. Her eyes shot from one master alarm to the next, all while she anxiously watched the missile close in faster and faster. From the bridge of the silent runner, Nico winced as he watched the unfolding events and heard the desperate pleas of his pilot. Amara, knock it off! What? Amara asked genuinely, holding her hands up like she'd just been caught raiding the cookie jar. You told me to make it realistic. Yes, I know, he said, closing his eyes. If you are finished with their computer files, end this now, before our people or the Staples actually get hurt. Aye, Captain, she said, disappearing to finish her task. The silent runner suddenly burst out from behind a larger asteroid and out into the open, presenting itself to the smaller freighter. Its PD turrets opened up, wiping out the missile closing in on Myra as it lined up a shot at the attacking freighter. Though the explosion was still close enough to rattle Myra's shuttle. A message soon appeared on the main view screen of the bountiful harvest from Amara. That was most unwise, she taunted playfully as if they had actually done anything at all, and it wasn't her all along. Emmett looked at the message with absolute horror in his eyes and smashed the button attempting to activate a comm channel. We didn't do it! We've lost control! Something has taken over our systems. Please! We surrender. His words were cut off, and he was silenced forever when a heavy particle beam pounded their shields, causing them to fizzle out in a dazzling display of colors. Then a second particle beam opened a hole in the lower compartments. A mere fraction of a second later, a heavy railgun round sheared the ceiling of the bridge clean off, venting everything and everyone to space. It proceeded to rip a long, deep gouge across the length of the vessel, exposing most of the compartments to hard vacuum. Goodbye, my lord, Nico said with utter disdain before turning to Amara's projector. And you! Amara. The ship's AI appeared sheepishly on the holoprojector. Yes, Captain. Next time a little less realism. You probably scared them all half to death, he accused as his eyes drifted to a console showing the damaged shuttle touching down in the landing bay. And did you have to tear up my shuttle so badly? He sighed while pinching the bridge of his nose. Sorry, Captain, she replied, slumping her shoulders. Have the databases been adjusted for the narrative we want them to see? And are they still working? He moved on somewhat tiredly. Yes. I also corrupted some files to simulate real-world battle damage, she replied a little more cheerily. Any survivors? Yes. 3 commoner engineers in the stern. Shall I vent them to space? She asked as casually as asking about the weather. Nico thought for only a few seconds before shaking his head. No. They won't know anything we need to keep secret. Let them return to their families. Aye, Captain, she said immediately and smiled. Now get us out of here before the system patrols catch us, Nico ordered before leaving the bridge to head to the landing bay. While the silent runner turned away and made a break for the nearest jump point, a woman narrowed her eyes from the captain's chair on a heavy freighter just in sensor range of the battle. So close, she grumbled as she stored her sensor readings in her database. Before she could do anything else, she received a transmission from 3 frigates supported by half a dozen gunships that were closing in to investigate what was going on. Civilian freighter, this is the Murdermenta System Patrol. Please vacate the area immediately. This area is restricted. Repeat, please vacate the area immediately. This area is restricted. Do you copy? Copy that, Patrol. Adjusting course now, she said with a bored tone of compliance. Plotting a new course, the woman moved toward a jump point heading toward House Valvois territory. Meanwhile, the patrol group closed in on the wreckage that was now the bountiful harvest. Hundreds and thousands of bits of debris now floated around the destroyed vessel like a cloud of shrapnel. Intermingled within the debris were a couple of dozen bodies drifting motionless as the cloud of destruction and death slowly expanded. The captains of the respective vessels scanned the damage as they began their investigation. Gunships. Poke around in that field and make sure there aren't any other ships hiding and waiting to strike. Once we get the all-clear, dispatch the retrieval ships. I want those bodies recovered. Every single one, the commander of the patrol group ordered. The last thing we need is to get dragged into a war with the Castons because we didn't respect their dead. Aye, sir. But the initial damage scans don't make any sense. You don't rip a freighter open like this if you're trying to capture it or steal its cargo, speculated one of the other captains. You're right. Dispatch search and rescue teams, along with an investigative team as well. There may yet be survivors. I want the investigators to start with the bridge. See if anything is still intact. Check for any data within their logs that might be useful. Another "aye, sir" reached his ears as his orders were carried out. It only took the gunships a few minutes to declare the area secure, but handling the rest would take much more time. Retrieval teams deployed in orderly fashion, gunships holding overwatch as shuttles threaded carefully through the expanding cloud of debris. Grappling drones latched onto the drifting bodies, pulling them gently into sealed pods. The silence of it all, dozens of lives snuffed out, their remains now cargo. Inside the wreck, the investigative team pushed through a ragged breach, mag boots clamping against twisted metal. The airless corridors told their story in frozen fragments, scorch marks painting the walls, severed conduits trailing like veins, personal belongings drifting past in slow-motion horror. This wasn't pirate work. Too much firepower, no attempt to claim the prize, one lieutenant muttered, helmet lights sweeping over the devastation. This was overkill. It's a wonder they didn't hit the core and vaporize this whole thing. When they reached the bridge, they found it half collapsed, most of the control stations slagged beyond recognition. One terminal, however, still flickered faintly with residual power. Patch it into the sled. See if we can pull anything, the lead investigator ordered. A tech knelt by the console, hands working quickly. After tense moments, a partially corrupted audio log sputtered to life, voices fractured, broken by static. It was Lord Emmett's conversation mocking the murder mentions, causing the investigators to frown in annoyance. The recording cut out in a burst of static, so they pushed forward. The next thing they found was toward the end of the logs. It was almost the entire conversation between Lord Emmett and the unknown captain discussing the transfer of payment for the Staples family. Bits and pieces gave way to static, but the story left behind was quite damning. The team exchanged glances, each man stunned to realize that the drama that had transpired on Volantis had somehow reached their system. Damn. It's a shame the captain didn't say his name, he grumbled. Get this back to command immediately, the investigator said, voice low. Until we know what we're dealing with, nobody outside this team breathes a word. Sir, came an excited investigator. Our scans have found 3 survivors. Thank Julius. Make sure they are retrieved safely and cared for properly. They might be able to give us more information to confirm or deny what really happened here. Yes, sir. Right away. Outside, the commander watched the retrieval numbers come in and allowed himself no relief, even when 3 survivors were announced. Something about the way the freighter had been torn open and the mystery ship that did it gnawed at him. Something tells me this isn't over, he muttered to himself, eyes fixed on the drifting graveyard. Not by a long shot, and his worries were only confirmed when moments later a high-priority alert reached his mind from his investigating team.